Chernobylite is a game that left me with a lot of mixed feelings. When I first went into it, I was wowed by its presentation, I was drawn in by its engaging and mysterious premise, and then I was hooked by its exploration aspects and its base building mechanics. Not to mention the enticing proposition of forming my very own gang for a power plant heist in radiation-stricken Chernobyl. It's like the suicide mission at the end of Mass Effect 2, just with more uranium. After playing for 4 or 5 hours though, I started to feel like I'd seen all there is to see and do. And I was really just repeating the same thing over and over, which is kind of ironic in a game that's all about time traveling, wormholes and rewriting history. But by that point, the game had sucked me in with the characters and the story, almost to the point that I felt like I was obligated to see the whole thing through. An obvious comparison to make here is to the Stalker series, but it also reminded me a fair bit of the recent Fallout games, with very similar gunplay, dialogue choices with NPCs, and environmental storytelling, not to mention that base building mechanic that almost looks like it's been carried across verbatim. Or with some good old-fashioned inventory management to appease even the most obsessive compulsive gamer. But what's the whole thing about? Well, I'm so glad you asked.
I said come in, don't stand there.
Set years after the meltdown at the Chernobyl power plant, you're heading back into the zone to try and uncover the reasons behind the disappearance of your wife, or so you think, who haunts you throughout all of these creepy flashbacks and voiceovers. Wait, was that a Blood reference? Yeah, and I guess as like a consolation prize, you can also figure out why exactly the plant went tits up. Yeah, you see, back in 1986, Chernobyl had a really bad day, when one of the reactors at their power plant just exploded. It's considered one of the worst disasters in human history, along with Rebecca Black and Cargo Shorts, and ever since it's become a popular backdrop and premise for video games.
Look at this place. 50,000 people used to live in the city. Now it's a ghost town.
In this, you're playing as a scientist named Igor. Is it Igor or Igor?
You must be Igor.
No, it's pronounced Igor.
Anyway, set at a time after the original accident, in the prologue, you and a couple of your buddies are sneaking back into the plant before you're ambushed by someone only referred to as the Black Stalker. A badass dude who can hop through wormholes at will.
Get out of here, Stalker.
So you flee with your tail between your legs and then have to form a crew to get back into the plant for reasons I'm not going to spoil. After getting through that first prologue, it's actually a pretty simple game to explain. So every day begins with your character waking up, obviously, having to come to grips with the harsh reality of living in an apocalyptic environment, unable to venture outside without the threat of serious injury or worse, death. So basically just a pretty good 2021 simulator. You then go to the mission screen and assign missions to the people in your crew, sending them off to bring back medicine, ammo, while you go off with your big boy pants on and tackle one of the main story missions. The ultimate goal is that you're trying to recruit this crew to help you out with the heist itself. Now there's 5 of these guys in total, and it's up to you to make sure that they all join up. In a neat touch too, when you look out at the landscape, you can see little military choppers flying around, which even indicates which areas are going to be more heavily guarded. I thought that was pretty cool. Then when you're out in the world, the entire place turns into a bit of a free-for-all, where you scavenge for mechanical parts, electronic parts, body parts, and more herbs and mushrooms, and you'll know what to do with them. No, seriously, at one point I had so many herbs and mushrooms that I could have started my own vegan soup kitchen and lived off the profits like a king. You've got this little PDA gadget which sends out a pulse that highlights all of these resources, and it got to the point where I could tell what the item was just off the shape of it alone before I even got close to it. But there's even more to it than that, like there's random encounters out there that you'll come across, and you can even stop and chat to these various NPCs that you're gonna keep running into. One of my favorite being this guy who's a bit of a walking meme, always squatting and going on about how much he loves hard bass. I don't blame him. Once you finish your main mission, you get a bunch of XP and hopefully earn a new skill point. You return to base, maybe get a new upgrade for Igor, and then spend all your newly acquired resources on upgrading the base and feeding the mouths of your crew. And this is where it really felt like I was playing Fallout 4, or dare I say it, Fallout 76. That aspect of the game where I was going around picking up everything that wasn't nailed down. All to go into that very similar looking base building mode and then placing down all these crafting stations and pieces of equipment to make the incremental upgrades to my secret Stalker lair. Sadly though, it's not in a hollowed out volcano and I don't have sharks with laser beams on their heads, but it's a start. And look, if the premise of spending 90% of the game running around and picking up all of these little items does not sound like your cup of irradiated tea, well, then you may as well just stop watching now. Because this is the core gameplay loop of Chernobylite. Wake up, pick a mission, head out, pick up a bunch of stuff, shoot some people, maybe choke a bitch, finish your mission, and then head back over the border before anyone knows you were there. Although these different mission areas are pretty detailed, there's really not that many of them to explore. And the side missions just involve going to a different area, finding a crate of items, and then that's it. Chernobylite does do its best to try to scare you a couple of times, and there's even a few well-placed jump scares that cause my asshole to pucker up so goddamn tight that I could have used it to crush beer cans. But mostly, I found the whole thing kind of relaxing. Being able to explore this gorgeous looking environment at my own leisure and then uncover the mystery behind what's happened. Now, I get a lot of shit off you people for using the term photorealistic in my videos, but this is one of those times when I really think that applies. It honestly might be one of the best looking indie games I think I've played in recent memory. They've apparently used 3D scans of Chernobyl here, which means it's probably the closest you're ever going to get to exploring the area, outside of actually going there yourself and coming back with an arm growing out of your back, or an extra set of balls growing on your chin. It also uses Nvidia's DLSS technology, which meant the game just ran super smooth for me, outside of a bit of stuttering here and there, which is to be expected. And I think it's the simple effects that just make this thing look so good. Like the sun shining through the leaves, the pockets of harmful fart gas off in the distance, or the way your flashlight sends shadows across every surface in real time. And it has a really good soundtrack too. It's kind of nice to listen to music that focuses more on ambience and atmosphere than just something that someone's pulled from the Hans Zimmer ripoff stock library. To contrast it, the character models look either passable or really kind of just not good. You can tell they've taken the easy way out here by just putting masks over all of these characters so they don't have to animate their mouths moving during dialogue. I say this because although they are wearing masks in the game, in their portraits you can see their faces and it's a bit off-putting. I mean, you can kind of justify this because they are living in a highly toxic and potentially life-threatening environment, but it does also kind of reek of just being an animation shortcut. I assume that the voice acting is good, but to be honest, I have no idea. I don't speak Russian, and I'm not pretentious enough to pass judgment on it, but I do think you're playing a game set in the Ukraine, so you should be playing it listening to Russian dialogue. There is a hell of a lot of dialogue in this game too, and characters frequently take the time to chew the fat just to tell you whatever's on their mind. Some of these characters are actually kinda likeable, which makes it all the more difficult when you've got to side with certain characters at key points in some of these missions. You see, that's the thing here, you're constantly having to make decisions in this game. Some of them hard, others a bit more black and white, but you still have to pick a side nonetheless. This is one of those instances where you're not going to please everyone no matter what you do or say, kind of like making YouTube videos. And eventually you're going to do something that's going to piss someone off and they're not going to like you. Again, a lot like making YouTube videos. As an example, I had to outright lie to one of the crew members to get her to join up, because I might have sort of accidentally done something I shouldn't have earlier on in the game. And although she was none the wiser to my deception, one of the other crew members got pretty angry about my lack of integrity and it kind of ruined our relationship. Let's just say we didn't go out for roller skating and ice creams after that.
Ладно, заходи.
And it again kind of reminds me of like a BioWare or a Fallout game in that sense, where you respond to a certain conflict with one option and it just ends up making someone as mad as it makes someone else approve. I really tried to balance out what decisions I made here, but it's really just an unwinnable situation sometimes, and every now and then you're just gonna have to take a hit. In a really nice inclusion too, you can just outright modify your decisions, because every time you're killed, you've even got the option to go back and change some of the choices you've made. You still can't please everyone, but hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. So if you end up realizing that you've buggered up, you've at least got the option to go back and change the way that some things pan out, which is pretty awesome. It's just a really ambitious way of trying to tell the story, especially for a game of this size. And there's just such a multitude of different routes you can take with each character to the way that everything finally connects, or doesn't connect for that final heist. Now, I do think it's pretty fitting that this thing is called Chernobylite, and I feel like that light in the game's title also does kind of relate to its content overall. Considering you're exploring a pocket of the world that's ground zero for one of the greatest disasters of all time, it sure is a pretty forgiving landscape, all things considered. Outside of the odd combat scuffle here and there, all you've really got to worry about is pockets of radiation, which can easily be cured. And the other being the gas clouds, but you've got a handy gas mask to avoid that stuff anyway. There's no mutated wild animals or anomalies to worry about, and the few electrical storms I encountered were all scripted. If you stick around for too long during a mission, the Black Stalker's going to show up, but by the time that guy appears, you've probably already finished your objectives and can just hightail it back to HQ. Despite it being this very hardcore relationship and base management sim with survival elements, that side of things really ain't that much to handle. Keeping your crew happy is about as simple as just making sure they're well fed, and that's as simple as just dispersing out bread rolls, literally. You can give your buddies better armor and weapons to improve their chances of success on these side missions, but I just never had any issues with these, so it was never something that I had to worry about. Although there is a base building feature here, it's kind of a finite system because you really only have to build something once. It's like, if I build a new machine so I can make heavy armor, I also need to make sure that I have enough power to keep it running. I have to make sure there's enough air filtration so we all don't die from carbon monoxide poisoning, and then I have to make sure that I accommodate the comfort level of the base so it doesn't piss off the other survivors. I mean, look, understandably, someone doesn't like it if they share their room with a giant stack of CRT monitors, but put a comfy chair nearby or a pot plant and it's going to alleviate that. So once I built that machine to make heavy armor, or built the machine to let me create lockpicks, and then made sure to balance all these other factors out, that's it. I don't need to add anything else. I guess what I'm saying is that you don't really need to build this grand custom little base, nor really can you. You're just building everything to meet a specific requirement. Once that's met, there's no reason to continue with this mechanic. Combat is also one of the more underwhelming aspects, which it almost kind of gets away with considering it is more about the overall story here than it is trying to compete with something like Escape from Tarkov. You've got 3 main weapons here, a revolver, a shotgun, and an assault rifle, and then later on you can craft a couple of energy weapons, the railgun and the plasma thrower, which may as well be a goddamn BFG. I do think modifying these guns is pretty fun. You can add all these different kinds of barrels, chambers, or grips to your guns, and it makes them easier to use, but it is a pretty basic roster. I can understand why they didn't add in things like a sniper rifle, because if they did, you could have easily just hung back and popped people in the head from a safe distance. So what they've done is keep these weapons only useful at medium to close range. You can't pick up enemy weapons because they're bio-locked or something like it's Metal Gear Solid, which I think really was just to stop the player from having this stockpile of guns, and to force you to find and use your own crafting stations. Your 3 main factors to consider here in combat's obviously your health, your armor, but also your psyche. Now this is actually a pretty cool idea. Basically, it means if you turn into an absolute killing machine and go around gunning everyone down, it's going to start to take a mental toll. Almost like Igor has some sense of remorse for all of this killing. The side of the screen even starts to get a bit hazy, like you're losing your grip on reality. Oops, there goes gravity. Only you can remove this as easily as just having a bowl of soup or swilling down some alcohol, which is quite very clearly supposed to be vodka. I mean, come on son, a clear spirit in the Ukraine, it's not going to be Bacardi, is it? Ignoring the fact of how badass it is to chug down an entire bottle of vodka just to wash away the bad vibes of having murdered someone, it does kind of negate the whole point, it seems, of what they were going for. Feeling bad about just having killed a bunch of people who never saw it coming? Well, with one swig, your conscience is cleared. I don't know if there's a whole humanity system here like the Metro games, where if you kill too many people, you're going to get the bad ending or something. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. But even if it is, I'm sure it's nothing that can't be fixed with a bit of vodka. Yes, alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems. Even more than that though, early on in the game you unlock an upgrade that lets you non-lethally take down enemies, completely disregarding this psych mechanic even more. The stealth takedowns are also a bit of a misnomer here. It always seems like someone, somewhere manages to see me doing it. So you do get forced into combat a lot of the time here without often even wanting to. Initially, combat isn't even challenging because you're up against enemies who almost always never see you coming, which gives you complete autonomy on how and when to initiate combat. When you're detected, they are pretty accurate, but it's easy to just hide behind something and lean out the side to fire at them. At that point, it's little more than just aiming for the head and trying to minimize how exposed you are, then use whatever works best, the revolver, the rifle, or the shotgun, and put these guys out to pasture. Where combat starts to get more challenging though, and almost completely pointless, is later on in the game when you're up against these armored soldiers who just take way too many bullets to put down to make it even worthwhile bothering.
Motherfucker.
The game promotes itself as offering up either a stealthy or a combat approach, but when the combat is just such a drain on your resources, it almost kinda forces you to sneak around them. Yeah, I love here too how the game was nice enough to block my vision with a leveling up notification. Yeah, thanks. Bruh. You can craft traps when you're out in the field, which is supposed to even the odds a bit, but the traps are really just like a minor inconvenience to these guys. I mean, Macaulay Culkin made deadlier traps than this.
Hello.
And I just found that I spent the second half of the game mostly avoiding everything to save time and ammo. Maybe that's the point, but it did make my railgun kind of seem sad, gathering dust in my inventory, instead of actually being put to good use and railing motherfuckers like it should have. But at least when you put your crosshair on something and shoot in this game, the bullet goes where you're aiming. Unlike a certain other Chernobyl-based first-person shooter. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Stalker. Get out of here.
Get out of here, Stalker.
It is also definitely, I think, a wasted opportunity to not let you do missions during nighttime. You can only venture out during the daytime, and they're missing out on a big horror angle here by restricting this. Aside from the enemy soldiers, you're dealing with the shadows, which are wormhole-hopping monsters that often come out of nowhere to ambush you, along with these little head crab looking things that come out of these radioactive buttholes. So really that's only 3 enemies in total, the guys with guns, the shadows, and the little radioactive butthole head crab zombies. They could have had scarier monsters coming out at nighttime and really racked up that survival aspect. Instead, when the world is probably at its worst, you're back at the hideout, snuggled up safe and sound in your little Betty Buys, dreaming about whatever stalkers dream about, probably diet sausage, bread, and energy drinks.
Всё у нас будет нормально.
At the end of the day though, I'd still give Chernobylite a thumbs up, but I can't stress enough how this really isn't a game for everyone. And if you're going to go into this one thinking it's going to be Stalker 2.0, well, you're going to be disappointed. It is a fun game, and it does have a pretty addictive gameplay loop if you can get into it, but it never really develops further than that. And if the story doesn't grab onto your nuts with a Vice-like grip, well, then you're probably going to lose interest pretty damn quickly. If nothing else though, maybe just check it out and do your part to support indie devs. Now get out of here, Stalker.
Bratва forever! Игорь!